I've created an application that gets two numbers from the user, which I'm going to call x and y, and then a button that will show the quotient of x divided by y. Let me just run this so you can see this work. This is a Visual Basic project. We'll do the same thing in C#. So I've got 5 divided by 2, and it shows me the answer is 2.5. But what if the user left one of the fields empty, or perhaps put some text in there rather than a number? And in this case, within the IDE, it's going to give me an error. It gives me an error in the code. It says invalid cast exception was unhandled. So what it tried to do is convert from a string to a type double, but there was nothing there that was numeric, and so it gave us an error. And that error is what we refer to as an exception, an unexpected error. There's not a compiler error because the code is okay, but it was the circumstance under which the code was executed that caused the problem. So that's an exception. What we want to do is we want to handle those exceptions as much as we can. If we weren't in the IDE, the program would have crashed or could have hung our system. So I'm going to stop the execution here and just kind of taking a quick look at the code. We have the two problem statements here are where we're converting the text value into a double. And so if those were letters or empty, that would generate an exception. So to get around an exception and to handle it, we can use something called a try-catch. So I'm going to type the word try. And as soon as I press the enter key, it's going to give me the rest of that structure. So I have try, then I have catch EX as exception, and end try. And what I'm going to do is take these statements that potentially are the problems. In fact, in this case, I'm going to take this whole block of code. Because if we have problems here with converting those values to double, then this probably isn't going to work, and I really don't want to show the quotient because there wouldn't be anything really to show. So I'm going to stick that whole block here in the try. And what this is saying is, okay, let's try this code. However, if there is an exception, if something goes wrong, I'm going to execute this code between the catch and the end try. So between the catch and the end try, I'm going to have another message box output. And you notice there's a little variable here called EX, which is a data type exception. That's the error or the exception that is thrown. And it has a property. One of its properties is message. And so I can get the message of the error. And then I'm going to add to that a carriage return line feed. And I'll add a second line to our prompt of try changing the input values. And we'll do a title of error. Okay, so I'm going to run my code again. And we'll see that 5 divided by 2 is still 2.5. But now if I make this blank, or if I put some letters in there like ABC, I get conversion from string ABC to type double is not valid. And then that was our exception message. And then the prompt that I added was try changing the input values. So my program no longer crashes. I can come in and change my input values and it still works. So again, we use a try. What we want to try, the code block we want to try, or the statement we want to try, our catch statement, and then an end try. So those three lines, try, catch EX as exception, end try, all go together. Now this EX really is a variable. I might call this my error, and then I could change it here to be my error, and that would work as well. So here now is that same problem in C#. Pretty much the exact same form. If I were to execute this, we would again see that 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. I'm going to change this one to nothing and execute, and it again is going to throw an exception and tells me format exception was unhandled, input string was not in the correct format. So the error in C# is slightly different, but the same problem going on in that we've got a string value that we're trying to convert into a double value, but there's nothing there to convert, or there's letters to convert rather than numbers. So we looked at the try-catch in VB. It's very similar, doing the same thing in C#. I'm going to go ahead and create my structure here, and that is try. Oops, let me end my program first. And then we have two brackets after the try, and then we'll have catch. And this is going to be an exception data type, and I'll use EX as my variable. And then again, I'm going to have a couple brackets, and I'll put a blank line between them. So here is the try-catch structure in C#. We don't have an end try. The brackets simply specify the beginning and ending of the try block and the beginning and ending of the catch block. Now I'm going to take the same code that we had where the potential problem is, and I'm going to cut that and paste it here in the try. We'll do the same thing we did earlier, message box.show, and I'm going to take that value of EX, which is my exception variable, and it has several properties, one of which is message, and I'm going to add to that a little string with a \n for a new line, and try changing the input values. And then my title for the message box will be error. Okay, so that's my code. So again, we have a try block, and if there is no problem with executing this code in the situation, this would never get executed. The catch would never get executed. But if this produces an exception somewhere, then it's going to execute this block of code, in this case, just this single statement. So let's try it. So again, 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. But if I make this one ABC, it tells me input string was not in the correct format. Try changing the input values. So I'll make that 5. And if this one were blank, I'm going to have the same problem. And so I'll make this 3. And now I'm told the value is 1.67. So that's how we can handle an exception using a try-catch, first in VB and then in C#.